All right, let's unpack this. For anyone joining us in the deep dive today, we have, well, without question, the most unusual source material we have ever had the privilege to analyze.
Oh, definitely. It's quite unique.
It is a single, extremely brief, yet impossibly dense passage taken from a document filed under the deceptively simple title, Oh, These.pdf.
Right. And it's a document that, on first glance, it just looks like a stream of highly exaggerated, maybe vulgar, almost comedic hyperbole.
Yeah, just noise almost.
Almost.
What?
But for us, the brevity is actually the beauty here. We are looking at a compressed case study in, let's call it maximalist linguistic architecture.
Ooh, I like that. Maximalist architecture.
Yeah, because even the briefest text, when you're really subjected to a close reading, it can reveal some pretty sophisticated strategies in language use, intent, and most pertinent here, I think, the strategic application of escalating tone.
Absolutely. Our mission today is laser-focused. We are treating this excerpt purely as a linguistic artifact. We want to dissect how the writer achieves what you might call descriptive saturation.
Good term. Saturation.
Our focus is on the escalating use of highly specific, sometimes contradictory, and almost, well, ridiculous vocabulary packed into this single rhetorical exchange. It really is a masterclass in aggressive description.
Yeah, and what stands out immediately is the aggressive conversational context that's established right from the very start. The text doesn't really flow like a statement, does it? It flows like a defiant answer.
Exactly, like someone's already asked a question.
Precisely. The author seems to be responding to a perceived, maybe unspoken challenge or question. And their response is just this overwhelming enumeration of descriptors, each one designed, it seems, to surpass the last in terms of intensity or scale or just plain absurdity.
And it just launches right in with that almost flippant, maybe confrontational opening line, which is our hook into the entire passage. Oh, these. Followed immediately by, my boobies. It's setting the expectation for what follows. It feels like the calm before the linguistic storm, really.
Yeah, it's the starting pistol.
So let's anchor ourselves in that opening frame then. The document title, Oh, These.pdf, and that opening phrase, Oh, These. They mirror each other perfectly.
They do.
It feels like a casual rhetorical question, but it's loaded with implication, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. That framing is essential for understanding the rhetorical purpose of the whole passage, I think. By starting with, oh, these, the speaker is basically asserting that the object about to be described is already the subject of conversation or observation or maybe even critique.
Right, like you were looking, weren't you?
Exactly. It's the linguistic equivalent of a dramatic flourish-like shining a spotlight. This immediate context puts the entire subsequent lift into the category of, well, defensive or maybe boastful identification. The speaker isn't just informing, they're confirming and simultaneously elevating the subject.
Okay, but if they are confirming, why start with such a mild, almost gentle term? The baseline description, the initial identification is my boobies.
Well, that choice is the absolute foundation of the rhetorical strategy here. If we look at this passage as a journey of descriptive escalation, boobies is the necessary starting point.
Okay.
It occupies the mildest, probably the most palatable, and often, let's face it, the most infantilizing end of this particular semantic field.
Yeah, boobies is pretty childish, usually.
It signals a certain casualness, right? The word lacks the anatomical severity or, the explicit vulgarity that characterizes pretty much the rest of the text.
So the expert writer, whether they did this consciously or just instinctively, chose the most innocuous term first, specifically to give themselves maximum headroom for the descriptive climb that follows.
Precisely. And this is a critical point for any writer, especially for you, the listener, the learner, to observe in any text that relies heavily on hyperbole. Had the author started with the most aggressive possible term, the list that follows would just be variations, right? Not true escalation.
Yeah, diminishing returns almost.
Exactly. By starting soft, they grant themselves the narrative arc required for a maximum rhetorical rise. It makes every subsequent descriptor feel like a genuine intensification, a deepening of the original concept. That initial word choice acts as a benchmark against which all the subsequent descriptors are measured.
So it sets the familiarity, establishes the object, and then using that foundation, the speaker just launches into what we identified as a kind of semantic assault.
Yes, and we should probably clarify what we mean by semantic assault. They aren't simply cycling through synonyms here.
No.
They're employing auxesis. That's the rhetorical device of arranging words or clauses in a sequence of increasing force. They are literally stacking highly charged adjectives and nouns, moving really rapidly between crude slang, functional physiology, and even technical scientific terminology.
Wow.
The objective isn't clarity, I don't think. The objective is overwhelming descriptive force. Language is being, well, weaponized here for maximal effect.
That structural move leads us straight into the core of the analysis then, the escalation itself. The source text layers aggressive, functional, and deeply hyperbolic descriptors. We called it semantic layering before, and the writer seems absolutely determined to overload our capacity for description.
Yeah, the layering feels highly deliberate, and it appears to be categorized by tone, almost functioning across maybe 3 distinct tracks simultaneously. We begin with the sharpest tonal shift right off the bat.
Okay, category A. The aggressive and anatomical. This is where the intensity just leaps immediately, isn't it? The first descriptive phrase following that mild opening is, "My massive fucking titties."
Boom.
Yeah.
This phrase is a dramatic linguistic pivot point. The movement is instantaneous.
Yeah.
From the soft and somewhat vague boobies to the explicitly sexual, vulgar, and confrontational fucking titties. And we really have to analyze the function of that inserted vulgar adjective, fucking. It's not really there just to describe the size. Massive already handles that, right?
Right.
It's there purely as an intensity modifier. It signals an overwhelming emotional charge, maybe pride, maybe aggression, escalating the textual intensity to a fever pitch almost immediately. It serves as a declarative statement. This is not just a casual observation. This is an aggressive boast about scale.
I wonder, though, if that level of immediate vulgarity can ever truly be surprising after the initial rhetorical question. Doesn't the sheer aggression risk flattening the tone just a bit too early? Where do you go from there?
That's a valid challenge. Actually, it's a good point. But I think the writer avoids flattening the tone by immediately following up with a phrase that introduces a crucial element of contradiction or structural complexity. My super stuffed milkies.
Ah, okay. This is where the juxtaposition gets really fascinating, I think. Super stuffed maintains that theme of overwhelming volume, maybe even exceeding massive, but then we get milkies.
Exactly. This phrase demands a closer look because it blends high volume with this, like low register function. Super stuffed implies a painful or perhaps maximal level of fullness, pushing the concept of scale even further than massive. But then milkies reintroduces the functional, the lactational aspect, the actual purpose of the object, but does so using a really cutesy, almost infantile descriptor.
Right, so we have the aggressive volume, super stuffed, immediately next to an infantilizing functional term, milkies. It's, like you said, tonal whiplash.
It feels like calculated juxtaposition. Why not use a more clinical or adult term like, I don't know, engorged mammary glands?
Right.
Because the writer seems to want the tension. The blend of the aggressive with the slightly childish, the practical with the absurd, prevents the text from just settling into a monotonous stream of obscenity. This momentary kind of jarring contrast is crucial. It keeps the reader alert, maybe slightly off balance, and sets the stage for the next equally strange category.
Which brings us to category B, neologisms and onomatopoeia. These are the phrases that seem to abandon descriptive function altogether in favor of pure sound and rhythm.
Yeah, pure sound. And this is the phrase that is just pure sonic theater. My honker bonker doinky boinkies.
I mean, if we were looking for a literal description of shape, size, or effect, we definitely wouldn't find it here, would we? This phrase feels purely invented, a playful yet still crude exercise in verbal gymnastics.
It really is. And what's fascinating here is that the writer is relying entirely on the power of phonetics and rhythm rather than semantics. They're using heavy alliteration and internal rhyme, honker bonker, doinky boinkies, to create this very deliberate, almost poetic cadence.
Huh. Poetic is an interesting word for it.
Well, in structure at least. This isn't really descriptive language in the normal sense. It's more like acoustic rhetoric. It functions like a verbal interlude, a moment of just nonsensical noise that kind of resets the descriptive clock before the next escalation.
It almost feels like something pulled from, I don't know, early 20th century nonsense poetry like Lewis Carroll or something, but applied to the crudest possible subject matter. It's kind of a throwback structure in a weird way.
It absolutely is. And it highlights that the goal here might not be just to describe the object, but maybe also to demonstrate linguistic prowess and a capacity for invention, however crude. This rhythmic element, the sound play, suggests the author prioritizes maybe comedic effect and shock over literal description. It proves that the tools of traditional poetics can be applied even aggressively to modern, very low-register language.
Okay, so if we synthesize this first section, the text has moved really quickly from common slang to aggressive slang, then incorporated these functional/infantile terms, and finally erupted into rhythmic, purely invented language. It's relentless.
It is deliberately preventing the reader, I think, from achieving any kind of tonal consistency. The objective seems to be maximum descriptive variety, achieved through these rapid, jarring transitions. It ensures that the object itself, that baseline of boobies, is almost completely lost beneath the sheer weight of all its modifiers.
Right, the description almost eclipses the thing being described.
Exactly.
Okay, so we now enter what feels like the most sophisticated portion of the passage, where the writer stops describing the object directly and starts describing its interaction with the, well, the known physical universe. This is where the hyperbole becomes truly literary almost, borrowing concepts from science to enhance the absurdity.
Yeah, this section attempts to ground the description in the physical world, but simultaneously uses metaphors that are so extreme that they immediately push the description way past reality. The focus shifts to the object's environmental magnitude.
The impact on clothing is the first indicator of this environmental magnitude. My fucking fabric stretching wind flapping.
Right. By choosing to describe the secondary effects, the stretching of fabric and the resulting wind flapping caused by movement or perhaps just sheer bulk, the text successfully communicates magnitude through, well, inconvenience and physical alteration. The description isn't just about size anymore, it's about presence. The object is supposedly so large, so forceful, that it actively alters its immediate physical surroundings and distorts the materials intended to contain it. This suggests not just volume, but dynamic mass and maybe even energetic movement.
If we think about descriptive writing generally, that's incredibly effective, isn't it? Describing the secondary chaos caused by an item is often far more vivid than simply stating its size, like describing the wake of a ship, not just the ship.
Precisely. It allows the reader to visualize the effect in motion, creating a far more memorable sensory impression. But then the writer makes the ultimate leap, the big one.
And this, I have to say, is where the analysis gets really deep and maybe a little weird. We hit the physics metaphor, the crown jewel of the passage, gravity-welling sex mountains.
This specific phrase is the conceptual zenith of the text. It really represents the absolute peak of the passage's linguistic sophistication, masterfully juxtaposed against its underlying vulgarity. The combination of that scientific terminology, gravity-welling, with the crude yet visually powerful noun, sex mounds, is, well, it's a stroke of literary, albeit absurd, genius.
Let's focus on gravity welling for a second. This is terminology borrowed directly from astrophysics and general relativity, isn't it? It implies immense mass, density, and a corresponding gravitational field strong enough to noticeably curve the space-time around it.
Correct, that's exactly what it implies. It transforms a physical attribute like weight or size into a cosmological phenomenon. The writer is effectively claiming that the object possesses the measurable physical weight and attractive force necessary to rival, celestial bodies.
Which is peak hyperbole.
It's hyperbole pushed into the realm of abstract, fundamental scientific law. It elevates the description past mere crude slang and into a sophisticated, highly educated literary device. Its application here is entirely ridiculous.
Why do you think the use of scientific jargon, particularly from something like astrophysics, is so effective in this type of aggressive hyperbole? Why not just say, my huge heavy tits, which is pretty direct?
That's a great question. I think it's because the use of high-register technical language, the lexicon of objectivity, right, lends this kind of faux seriousness, a false authority, to the claim of immensity.
Oh.
It creates an almost shocking cognitive dissonance. The writer is essentially saying that the common language of adjectives is just insufficient to describe this magnitude, and therefore they must borrow from the most fundamental laws of the universe to get the point across.
So it's an intellectual flourish.
Absolutely. Designed for maximal descriptive power, maybe even a meta-joke where the vulgarity is made somehow profound or at least more memorable by its technical description.
I see your point. The tension between the lofty scientific concept and the crude subject matter is the whole point, then. It ensures the phrase is unforgettable. The writer's really showing off their range, aren't they?
That range is precisely the takeaway, I think. And having reached this cosmological level of description, the passage now has to conclude. It needs a definitive, final, rhetorical summary. It has to land the plane.
That brings us to the ultimate culminating question, which cleverly cycles back to the original premise. You mean these super-duper ultra hide your goddamn motherfucking tits?
Then that final line acts as the rhetorical closure. It recycles and compounds the most intense elements used throughout the entire passage. It is the definitive answer, delivered with a compound modifier that pushes descriptive saturation to its absolute logical extreme.
Let's dedicate a moment to dissecting that monstrous compound modifier. Super duper ultra hyper goddamn motherfucking, that's a lot.
This is the apex of the linguistic escalation, a very deliberate fusion of different registers. Notice the structure. We combine the friendly, almost childish language of trivial hyperbole, super duper ultra hyper terms you might use to describe, I don't know, a favorite breakfast cereal or a cartoon hero.
Right, like a kid would say.
Exactly. With the most explicit and aggressive vulgarity available. Goddamn motherfucking. This blend achieves complete descriptive saturation, encompassing both the sort of innocence of excess and the raw aggression of crudity in a single explosive breath.
It's the rhetorical climax, basically achieved by throwing every possible type of modifier, from the playground right down to the gutter, into one single sequence.
Pretty much. And the final noun, tits, serves as the concluding, most direct and most vulgar identification. The journey is complete. We've traveled from the soft boobies through cosmology and nonsense verse, finally settling on the sharpest, most direct term available in the English language to answer that opening question, oh these.
So when we step back and look at the whole thing, what does this brief, intense passage tell us about the architecture of extreme language? What does this single excerpt really reveal about communicative intent?
Well, I think it tells us that the writer's primary intent was probably not mere descriptive accuracy, right? It was more the pursuit of total, overwhelming, and exhaustive characterization through multiplication. This is descriptive overkill used as a communicative strategy. The writer clearly determined that any single descriptor, no matter how strong it was, would simply be insufficient for their purpose.
And if we count the unique descriptive phrases, we found at least 7, right? Applied to a single object in rapid succession. Why is that volume significant in itself?
The sheer volume forces the reader, or listener, to acknowledge the claim of overwhelming magnitude. It's a technique used less to accurately describe the physical object itself, and more perhaps to convey the speaker's intense emotion pride, maybe, or an aggressive posture regarding that object. It suggests an obsession with amplification, as if the initial gentle description of boobies was not just inaccurate, but may be offensively inadequate to the subject matter in the speaker's view.
So for you, the listener, the learner listening to this, the key lesson here is incredibly transferable, isn't it? Regardless of the source material's actual subject, it illustrates how rhetorical effectiveness can sometimes depend entirely on the strategic manipulation of linguistic intensity and tone.
Exactly. It demonstrates the power of juxtaposition. The ability to mix high and low registers, scientific terminology, aggressive slang, playful nonsense is actually a sophisticated rhetorical tool. It seems designed to achieve maximum cognitive impact and memorability. The structural blueprint itself is key. Establish a baseline, execute a sharp, aggressive rise, provide maybe a rhythmic distraction, reach a kind of cosmological zenith, and then conclude with an overwhelming, all-encompassing summary.
That structure is so precise when you lay it out like that. Let's quickly recap those 3 unique flavors of vocabulary we unearthed that really make this passage stick in the mind. First, there was the functional and aggressive language.
Right, we analyze that blend of scale and function with phrases like massive fucking titties and super stuffed milkies, where the sheer scale and the sort of soft functional aspect clash quite dramatically.
Then, the invented and rhythmic interlude. The weird one.
Yeah, the acoustic rhetoric of honker bonker doinky boinkies, which really prioritized sound, internal rhyme, and pure invention over any kind of literal meaning.
And finally, that literary and physical peak, the intersection of science and slang.
The ultimate hybrid, maybe. Gravity-welling sex mounds, a phrase that somehow successfully merges astrophysics with the most crude descriptive nouns, achieving the maximum descriptive altitude of the entire piece.
It's really quite astounding that so much intentional linguistic complexity could be packed into such a brief and, frankly, vulgar burst of text.
It really is a miniature masterclass in a very specific kind of rhetoric.
So this single excerpt from these.pdf really proves that the power of language isn't solely in choosing the right word, but sometimes, perhaps, in choosing every single possible word and deploying them with increasing, almost frantic intensity. It is a fantastic example of a maximalist strategy applied to a truly minimal text length.
Absolutely. And if we use this microanalysis to maybe think about the broader context of communication, especially, say, in the age of rapid, high-intensity online rhetoric, this raises a crucial question for you, the listener, to contemplate. When does descriptive intensity cease to add distinct meaning and instead just become a kind of rhythmic, escalating noise, just volume for volume's sake? What boundary does language truly cross when it utilizes every tool at its disposal, from the fundamental laws of astrophysics to explicit vulgarity and even playground rhymes to describe a single simple concept?
That's a really interesting thought to end on.
We encourage you to maybe analyze the rhetorical strategies you encounter in your daily life and consider whether the goal of the communicator seems to be conveying meaning or perhaps just achieving saturation. Where's the line?